There is a vibrant and growing hub of education, entrepreneurship, and alternative learning models in New York City, and our guests today are very much a part of that. Jacob Griebel and Melissa Sornick founded Acton Academy Seacliff in 2020 in Seacliff, New York, which is a part of Long Island, and it's about 40 minutes from New York City. But they decided recently to move their Acton Academy into the heart of New York City because they're finding growing demand for learner-driven education more generally and for the Acton model specifically in the Big Apple. Acton Academy, as you know, if you listen regularly to the podcast, is a global network of learner-driven microschools that began more than a decade ago and now includes about 300 independently owned and operated schools in more than 30 U.S. states and several countries. Jacob and Melissa are planning to open the doors on their New York City Acton Academy location this fall. Jacob Griebel and Melissa Sornick, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you, Karen.
It's great to have you here to talk about Acton. I'm a super fan of the Acton model and love talking to Acton founders and sharing this vision of learner-driven education where young people are really empowered to take charge of their own learning and find their passions and discover, kind of who they are and what they're meant to do in the world. The kind of hero's journey is a key part of the Acton model, where every learner is considered a genius in their own way and is encouraged to kind of find their unique pathway, being facilitated by the adult guides in the space, but they're very much in charge as learners of what they're doing. And so I want to start maybe with a little bit of your background, Jacob and Melissa. You're both social workers. You're a clinical social worker. Jacob, you're also a licensed social worker who has a background in special education. How did you both come to discover this world of alternative education models?
Jacob, you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I came to it probably through a number of avenues. The first one was in thinking back about my own education. I was fortunate. I was a public school child. I went to school in New York City, but I went to school in New York City back in the late 60s and 70s. And I was tracked. I was a gifted student and I was tracked. And I didn't like school very much, except for the areas that I was interested in. And in those areas, I really shined. In other areas, not so much. But I felt upon looking back that there was more freedom. And what really started to change for me was when I had children. And I had one child who, when we were on Long Island at that point, one who fit right in the box, met the standards, came home every day, did their homework, got their grades, was very driven by grades. And then I had another one who basically wanted to break the box, smash the box, and really wanted no part of it. And the surprising part was also a gifted child. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And it wasn't great. And then I started looking at alternatives, and I started looking at these populations of really bright kids, and I started discovering they really weren't doing well in school. And that's when I decided to become a social worker to try to help these kids and figure out what was going on with them. And I quickly realized that alternatives didn't happen until high school. And so what do you do from elementary to high school? And then in working with a lot of kids, the question or the conversation that would always come up is, I hate learning. And I'd say, I don't know, do you think you really hate learning? Is that really the problem? Or do you maybe not like how the learning is presented to you? I said, because you're pretty smart. It seems to me that you know a lot. And so I also had the opportunity of working in an alternative school in Manhattan for gifted children. And I saw that there could be other possibilities, but that wasn't quite the right fit anyway. And then Jacob and I started working together. And after going through this, again, our own personal experiences, I think, and then being bombarded, literally bombarded with this in the practice, and parents fighting with kids to get their work done, and everything was so grade driven and all of that. we just started looking for, there has to be something out there. And Jacob found Acton. And I thought, wow, this is I would have, yeah, I would have loved this. This would have been great. Maybe not for both my kids. And that's the thing. It's not for everybody. But for a child who is self-directed and curious and wants to learn and has their own opinions and is a critical thinker, I don't think it gets better than Acton. I think it's just the perfect model. So that's my story about coming to Acton and believing in it.
Oh, so great. Jacob, what about you?
So kind of have a similar start in the sense that I was also a kid who school came to rather easily, but I was often bored or acting out, for lack of a better term. And going through public school, I also had the experience of watching one of my younger siblings who had some more severe disabilities really not find a place in the public school and really not find a place, or a program that was right for him. So I was lucky enough to have parents who were willing to take the risk and homeschool and eventually find a private program for him that they were really able to put their hands on and mold. So it actually fit him. It wasn't just a box or a holding place, which for me was what school felt like for a really long time. You just have to go through these experiences and kind of just sit there and deal with it, even if you already knew what was going on or felt like you weren't gaining anything from that type of model. And so I knew from an early age that there had to be a better way. So as I progressed through schooling myself, I started to look into options as to what I can do, how I can start to make school better for some of these kids. And I kind of stumbled upon a program that would help individuals with dyslexia, teach them how to read. And so I was taking this course, and this is while I was in college. So I'd already made it through K-12, went to college, taking a course on how to help and tutor children with dyslexia, and realized during that course that every example that this woman put on the board and every, sign and symptom, so to speak, of dyslexia fit me to a T. And so I had this kind of epiphany while taking this course, like not only was I a kid who this model didn't work for, but this model also failed me because it never identified what I actually needed to be successful. It totally missed that mark. And to me, that was just like, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was like, all right, this clearly is not right for everybody. There has to be a better module. And so I started exploring and seeing what was available. During this time is when I met Melissa and we started, working on, we called them social cognition programs, but they were groups for some of these outside the box kids to kind of help them navigate, but also explore their talents and do strength-based learning and things like that. I also started working as a SETS provider, which is a special education teacher support services provider at a Democratic free school in Brooklyn. So I kind of got to get a taste of what a truly alternative model looked like. And for a time, I really thought that was going to be my path. And fortuitously, I guess, it did not work out there. But at the same time, I kind of, in my Googling, really discovered Acton. And this was in January of 2019. And I said to my now wife, I was like, we need to go visit this place. And we got on a plane in February and went to go visit the Austin campus. They were having some type of open house and fell in love and realized that, as Melissa said, this is an option for some of these kids. And this is a truly, self-directed model, learner-driven model that offers so much more potential and upside for those who are looking for it.
Oh, what a great story. I want to dig a little bit deeper into kind of the launch of Acton Academy Seacliff. Before we get there, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you were noticing in your private practice and in your work together with students. What have you seen some of the issues with kind of standardized education models, and has it gotten worse? Have you noticed some trends over the last decade or so?
Yeah, the trends that I see, the thought that has been going through my head as Jacob was talking is, what is success and what does success mean? And I think that what's happened is that success has now been equated to these super high grades and this competition.
Mhm.
But what is it for? And what we're finding is that these kids identify by what they're good at, but what they're good at academically. And if their grades come apart, they come apart. We've had situations where we have one teacher in the Seacliff district at the high school who tried a little experiment. He wasn't giving the grades back quickly enough. And the kids were, I have to have my grade. I need to know my grade. And I actually asked this client of mine, I said, do you think you did a good job on your paper? I think I did a really good job. I said, then why is the grade so important? Because I have to have it. And to me, this notion of keeping your grades up and then being the other problem I find is, and we never had this when we were kids, but these portals that you go on to check your child's progress and whether the homework is handed in on time. And it doesn't matter whether you show mastery or not. It's about how you do the job. This is not a job. And I tell kids, my mantra in the office is school is a tool for you. You are not a tool for school. Just to cut their anxiety a bit because they feel like they have to perform for the school. And if they don't, an email comes home or a phone call comes home. It's causing dysfunction in the family. It's causing hostility in the family. It's putting so much pressure on kids. We're seeing so much anxiety. And it's damaging. It's damaging. And these are smart kids who have great ideas and they can't even get them out because if they're not presented according to the rubric, they're not okay.
Yeah,
that's
part
what I
of
see.
it cuts both ways because the parents get caught up in it too. It's like, okay, my kid has to be a straight A student. They have to, it's Ivy League bound or bust. And it's really just this hyper competitive is the word, and to a point of unhealthy.
And it's so not true.
Right.
So not true.
And how have you seen this change? Is this worsened over your careers? What have you seen happen there? And why, maybe?
I think the demands are greater. I think after the pandemic, I feel like what we're looking at after the pandemic is that I'm disappointed because I thought that maybe some things would change. But I see that we've really stayed where we were, and it was the expectation that we'll just go back to business as usual. However, people are not business as usual. I think that teachers suffered greatly during this time. I think that kids didn't meet their social emotional what's the word that I'm looking for? There are certain strides that they need to hit developmentally, and they missed those because they weren't with other children in these transition periods. So we're seeing children that missed they have a lot of gaps in their social emotional development, gaps in their relationships and relationship building, which is making it harder. And so I think again, it's that drive to keep kids in the public school and say, this is where they have to be successful. If you do anything else, and if you don't push them hard, they're not going to go to an Ivy League school. They're not going to get a good job. They will fail. If you don't win, you lose.
Yeah, it's very much the model here on Long Island is that, there's one path. You go to high school and then you go to college. There is no, wiggle room. There's no alternatives. There's really kind of a narrow view as to what success in education looks like. And that is it.
Yeah.
So Jacob, so you discover Acton and you say, well, here's this new model, here's an alternative that really resonated with you. You said you went to Austin, Texas, which is where Acton Academy was founded more than a decade ago by Laura and Jeff Sandifer. And Laura Sandifer wrote the book Courage to Grow that talks about the Acton model. What happened next for you?
So what happened next? As I said, it was right at the beginning of 2019. So the whole world kind of changed within 2 months of me visiting Acton. And truth be told, we kind of saw it as an opportunity. We were like,
can I just stop you right there? So this was 2019 that you went in, you said in early 2019 or early in the academic year?
No, like early in 2019. I visited in February, I believe it was. So literally,
we shut down in March.
Literally right before everything happened.
Well, that was 2020. So was it the beginning of?
No, it was 2019 when I visited, and then, we had to apply first. So
I see. Okay,
that's right.
Right. You had to fill out the application. So we did that year, and we had applied.
I see.
The plan was not to open in 2020. We had just gotten approval at that point. But then because of everything that was changing and all of these families who were reaching out to us, who were just not happy with what was happening in the public school, just all the above, the remote learning, all of that. They were interested in an alternative. So Melissa and I were like, all right, let's take this as an opportunity and try and set up what people were calling, pods at that point.
Right.
Start with that.
Yeah. Okay. So you were ready to go to open in a physical location. Then the shutdowns occur and you say, well, let's keep going. Right. I mean, did you have a moment where you said, well, maybe we shouldn't do this? And, or was it always like, this is the time?
Not that it was the time, but it was the opportunity. And we always knew that this was going to happen. We were, at that point, we were kind of toying with the idea of where we wanted to do it. Melissa lived in Seacliff at that time. The social work practice was in Seacliff. So we're like, okay, let's give this a shot and treat this as a trial run and see where it goes.
And so then you create this pod. What was that like in kind of those early months of running Acton Academy Seacliff as a pod?
It was very small. It was a pod of really just 3. And so it was an interesting experience, and we learned a whole lot about what works and what doesn't work, and really what a model like this requires to be successful.
And so what happens next? At what point are you thinking we want to have something more than a pod? Maybe we should think more strategically about location, kind of what was the progression over the following years?
Yeah. So, I mean, that next year we really worked to try and see if we can build up the Seacliff program. But this is when we started to run into a lot of what we just described, a lot of parents who weren't necessarily ready, I guess, to take the leap of faith that is Acton, to leave the public school program that they trusted. And a lot of them moved to Nassau County Nassau County is often touted as one of, the best public school systems in the country in different parts. And so that, I think, was a big leap for a lot of families. And so we, at that point, decided, we get so many people from New York City asking us about our program. Like, I was getting most of the interest when we were pushing for Acton Academy Seacliff was coming from the boroughs. It was coming from Queens. It was coming from Manhattan. It was coming from, even Connecticut. And we were like, all right, maybe we need to start to shift and meet our demand, because this is something that's being looked for here.
Yeah, and there isn't currently an Acton Academy affiliate in New York City, so it seems like a great opportunity. Where are you now in the process of kind of migrating from Seacliff into New York City and planning to open there in the fall?
So we are in the process of securing a location. We have a bid in at a couple places, and we are also in the process of hosting open houses to try and just start to recruit people and really find people who are serious and committed to this type of model.
And Melissa, what are you finding as you host these open houses and talk to families in New York City? What are they looking for, and what is attracting them to Acton?
I think that a lot of them, and I think this is true on Long Island too, are looking for something that is like the Acton model. But I think there's just this, if they could take the Acton model, if one day the public school would open up and have like a competency-based learning model or something like Acton, they would be happy. I think they're really interested, and I think they like the idea. But as Jacob said, it's just that leap of faith. It's like when you're standing on a diving board and you've got one foot off. So they're very interested. There is a fear among some about, well, what if they're afraid that if they pull their child, will their child be successful? And I think that is one of, would they be able to go back to a public education if we so chose? What will this do as far as their college experience is concerned? Will they be accepted to colleges? Is it accredited? All of these things. And I think it's a little bit of the fear and anxiety. I do think that they're interested. I think that they want it. I think that it's just helping them get past the hurdle of, this is really for real. And it's a start, and I get it. It's a startup. So having worked in a startup school before, which, by the way, now that school has over 100 students. And it's not an Acton, it's a private school for twice exceptional and gifted children downtown. I remember those days as a recruiter as the admissions director. And, it was like, okay, when you have a few more students, let me know. But then there are the pioneer parents who just say, I'm going to do this. And that's, I think, what we're looking for, is the ones that are willing to jump on board with us and be part of who we are. That's
It's
what
so great.
I'm thinking.
And I mean, I think that the momentum is with you. Certainly there's increasing interest in alternative learning models, more awareness, I think, even since 2020, of the limitations of our kind of standardized education system, and parents open to other ways of teaching and learning. And then, of course, you have Acton, which has now this more than a decade of a track record of success, and graduates of Acton academies who are going on to do great things. So hopefully all of that is working in your favor as you create this startup, because it does have that success pathway that families could look to. And Jacob, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about your organizational structure with your Acton model, that you've decided not to be kind of a recognized private school. You also don't want to be more a homeschool co-op. You want to do something sort of in between. So tell us a little bit about that process.
Sure. So we formed what's called a private education association, or a private membership association, specifically for the purposes of providing education. What that is essentially we are a unincorporated ministry that functions as a non-for-profit. This is there's a lot of law behind this, and court cases that we can get into, but I won't, about just how education is a fundamental right, and that it's a right for parents to direct their child's education, right? There's the Pierce versus the Society of Sisters, for instance, is a case that I recommend people go and check out. And what it does is it basically allows us to step outside of kind of some of those boxes we talked about before, where the schools say you have to do this and you have to do this. And we say, why? As a parent, as educators, I think that we should have the rights and the options to do these things on our own. And that's what a PEA affords us and allows us to do.
Yeah, and I talk to a lot of education entrepreneurs and aspiring education entrepreneurs who are really attracted to the PMA or PEA model. It can be a great way, as you say, to enable education innovation and experimentation that's not often so easy to do within a kind of conventional school system, and even within a conventional private school system. So great to see that you're opening with that and moving forward with that. Maybe we can talk a little bit, for those my listeners who are not as familiar with Acton, about what is sort of the philosophy of learner-driven education, and why do you find it so appealing?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, you said at the beginning, the line that we use a lot is that every child is a genius, and we truly believe that they can find their calling to change the world. They just need to be in the right environment, and so we believe that through Socratic guiding, experiential hands-on learning and encouragement from, a community, a supportive community, they really can embark on their own hero's journey, build their own gifts, hone their own talents, and through, curiosity and innovation and a little bit of grit, they can forge their own path and really make a difference.
What about you, Melissa? What do you think about the Acton model, and why does it appeal to you?
It appealed to me, if I can talk a little bit about a little case study that I, because to me, really seeing it work, is proof to me that this is right. And we had a child in the program who advanced over a year, I think, in math, went ahead almost 2 years in math independently, was totally bought into running their day, running their schedule. This was a child who had difficulty getting out the door for school in the morning. And after a month or two, showed up on time with lunch, organized, really got into all of the building of the rules of the studio and such. And the thing I think that impressed me the most was when they earn their points for their academic work that they're doing independently, they can focus on a passion project. And so this particular child chose a passion project. They wanted to learn Photoshop because they're very interested in animation. And so I have an Apple Mac laptop, and I handed her the laptop. And she said, well, now what do I do with it? I said, well, now you have to go figure out how you're going to learn Photoshop. And she looked up all of the tutorials on her own. She studied tutorials. Mind you, she was still doing her work every day. And she was doing incredible things with Photoshop, and earned so much that we had an entrepreneurial quest, and she built her own business. She borrowed from us to invest in her business after researching it. She made money. And then she planned a year-end trip, which she did herself for the group. She made the phone call, she booked the reservation. We just sat there and we watched. And one day she started leading a Socratic discussion because Jacob was called away to do something. And when he came back, she had already started the lesson. And I thought, this is how learning should be. This is how you can go from school into the world with confidence, knowing that you can do something without somebody saying, okay, now it's time for you to do this. So to me, that's learning. Learning is life, and that's life.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the future of education, both kind of alternative education models and Acton specifically? Where do you see those going? And then the conventional system, do you feel like it needs to get worse before it gets better? Do you think that there can be some opportunity there for these alternative models to positively impact the conventional system? What's your kind of 30,000-foot view of American education?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that Acton in so many ways is really ahead of the curve in that regard. Using Sal Khan's work and Khan Academy and all that, opening the doors for really anybody, anywhere to teach themselves something is the future of education. With tools like YouTube and, especially everything that's coming out now in terms of AI and just the potential that opens up in terms of the ability to educate ourselves and really use the tools that we are given to progress leaps and bounds in the same amount of time that we would normally expect, a traditional model of education to progress. I think that Acton definitely is ahead of the curve there. And, part of the whole idea behind Acton is this, disruptive education model. We're not necessarily trying to fix the old system, but we are trying to show them that there is another way and hope that one day they will adopt so many of what makes this model work. So my hope is definitely that this movement continues to gain strength and that people continue to look for these alternatives outside the traditional. And then hopefully the traditional model takes note and starts to tag along.
What about you, Melissa? What do you think?
I have to agree with Jacob. I think that we need to move forward. And I think that we need to give our young, bright people a chance to really discover who they are and what they can do. Because my fear is that if you lose these really bright learners, and I see that happening with underachievement and being distracted by other things where learning or, the learning environment becomes undesirable. These kids I'm concerned, these kids are our future.
Right.
And they need to shape this world, and they need to be able to think critically, and they need to be able to make these decisions. They need to be interested, and they need to be interested in the right things. And I feel that if conventional education doesn't change, where is education coming from then? Where is the learning going to come from for us to be able to problem solve, and not be on TikTok? And I don't have a problem with all of TikTok. And I have to say that because half my clients would say, oh, don't talk about TikTok like that. But you know what I mean? Getting lost in these things because you're avoiding that drudgery of an assignment that you find absolutely meaningless. And it's just a shame to waste those brains.
Yeah. And I even want to take it one step further because, the traditional model of school is preparing students for something that doesn't necessarily exist or won't exist by the time they're in the working world. And, another part of what makes Acton so great is their focus on that whole idea of, it's more important to learn to do, learn to be, and learn to learn. Because once you have those skills, there's really nothing that you can't do. Preparing yourself for jobs that don't exist at this point is out of the hands of the educators and really needs to be put back into the hands of those who will be experiencing it and looking for those jobs.
So you are in the process of recruiting families in New York City to join you as you launch this fall. You're hosting open houses and informational sessions. I love my New York listeners and viewers, and if any of them are interested in joining your new Acton Academy community there, what would you say to them? What kinds of students are you serving? What ages? Kind of general location? I know you're still kind of narrowing down a location. What would you say for your pitch for these New York City families?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'll start, and Melissa, please feel free to jump in. But,
Sure.
we are, like I said, looking to host world changers. I want the next generation of kids to really have the opportunity to do and be everything that they, that potential is there for them to be. And so, those who are entrepreneurial minded, self-directed, inspired by the things that they're interested in, those are those are the types of people who I would first suggest come check us out. And the goal is to eventually be a K-12 program. Right now, we're trying to start with an elementary age cohort. So that's, who we are focused on at the moment. But as I said, it's, the whole picture is what we're looking to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, in that vein, I am really a believer in entrepreneurship. I was raised in a family like that. My dad started his own business. I started my own business. My son just came back from an young entrepreneurs convention in Europe. And there is this culture in our family. And I think we've all done pretty well. And there's nothing like being able to enjoy what you do and feel fulfilled and pursue your bliss, which is also, I believe, part of the hero's journey. So I'm excited about that, and everything that Jacob said, and I'm excited for families to see how they and their children can grow on this. So far as location, we are looking at locations that are obviously Long Island provides more localized outdoor space. So what we're doing is we're trying to be very strategic with regard to accessibility. So will be accessible to Central Park, the playgrounds. We're looking right now at an Upper West Side location, and very near all public transportation. So buses and subways and access in that way. And a neighborhood, a good neighborhood. So that's where we're looking geographically as far as location is concerned.
So if anyone wants to connect with you and find out more about what you're offering and hopefully enroll their children if they're local in New York City, what's the best way for them to reach you?
So they can first check out our website, which is actonsynergy.org. And there's tons of information on there, as well as ways to connect with us directly and apply.
actonsynergy.org. I wish you so much luck and success, Melissa Sornick and Jacob Griebel, in really expanding education options for families in New York City, and especially focused on learner-driven education models. Thank you both so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, it was a pleasure.